Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into one of the most baffling, completely silent tragedies in human history. We're talking about an event where nature essentially became an invisible assassin overnight. You know, when we think of natural disasters, we usually picture roaring winds, shaking earth, or massive infernos, right? Well, this story completely defies all of that. There was no roaring wind, no shaking ground, just a sudden, catastrophic shift that literally changed absolutely everything for the people living in its shadow.
I want you to just imagine going to bed in a peaceful farming village. You've had a long, exhausting day of work, and the evening feels perfectly normal. There's no storm brewing outside, there's no earthquake shaking the ground. Actually, absolutely nothing unusual is happening at all. The night is quiet, but maybe a little too quiet. Before long, even the village dogs stop barking, and the usual chorus of nighttime insects just falls completely silent. And then, sometime after midnight, without a single warning sign, almost every living creature around you simply stops breathing.
So when investigators first arrived on the scene to piece together what on earth happened, they were obviously looking for the usual suspects. But the cause of this mass casualty event, it wasn't some sudden, highly contagious disease sweeping through the valley. It wasn't a covert act of war, and no, it wasn't a poisoned water supply intentionally targeting these villages. The actual culprit was something that literally sounds like science fiction. A quiet, peaceful lake had, well, exploded.
By sunrise, this unbelievable, entirely invisible event had claimed the lives of over 1,700 people. It's just a staggering number to wrap your head around. But the devastation didn't even stop there. We're talking about over 3,000 cattle, countless sheep, wild animals, and get this, even birds mid-flight literally plummeted out of the sky. When people from neighboring villages arrived the next morning, they walked into a scene of absolute, horrifying stillness. Entire communities had been wiped out overnight by an unseen force, yet the buildings and the landscape itself were completely, totally untouched.
Okay, so what exactly was hiding beneath Lake Nyos? Tucked away deep in the remote volcanic mountains of northwestern Cameroon, this lake looked, honestly, pretty magical. It was the picture of absolute serenity, crystal clear water sitting right in the crater of an inactive volcano. Local farming families had lived there for generations. And what's super interesting is that local folklore actually considered Nyos to be a good or safe lake, which was totally distinct from other nearby lakes that were rumored to harbor dangerous spirits. It was a vital source of life. I mean, no one could have possibly imagined that nearly 700 feet below its tranquil surface, this lake was quietly storing a massive, invisible killer.
If we track the events of that fateful night, August 21, 1986, it reveals an incredibly chilling progression. It all kicked off around 10 p.m. A few surviving witnesses remembered hearing this strange, distant rumbling. Some said it was like a deep, bubbling sound, while others described it sounding almost like a distant helicopter just hovering over the water. Then, right around midnight, the lake suddenly erupted. But, and this is key, instead of lava or boiling water, it unleashed an enormous cloud of compressed gas. By 1 a.m., this invisible gas cloud, which experts estimated was roughly 160 feet high and moving at over 30 miles per hour, literally spilled over the crater lip and flowed silently downhill into the sleeping valleys. By sunrise at 6 a.m., the widespread devastation was complete.
To really wrap our heads around how this happened, we have to look at the physics of the gas involved. Normally, atmospheric air mixes high up in the sky and, contains the life-sustaining oxygen we all need to survive. But the carbon dioxide that erupted from Lake Nyos, it is incredibly dense. It is way, way heavier than the air we normally breathe. So when this massive cloud erupted, it didn't just rise up and dissipate harmlessly into the sky like you might think. Instead, it sank. It hugged the ground, flowing silently through the valleys and gorges, exactly like an invisible avalanche or a really fast-moving river. As the villagers slept, this heavy, suffocating blanket literally just pushed the lighter oxygen out of the way, extinguishing all life right in its path. You can imagine the immediate aftermath left first responders and global investigators completely baffled. I mean, the total absence of traditional disaster evidence made the tragedy look almost supernatural, like something straight out of a ghost story. There were absolutely no burns on any of the victims, no visible injuries, no crushed buildings, zero signs of traditional chemical poisoning. Entire families were found exactly where they had fallen asleep, completely unbothered. But eventually investigators stumbled upon a really crucial clue. All the oil lamps in the villages were snuffed out. Now, since fire requires oxygen to burn, and carbon dioxide displaces oxygen, this one little detail pointed scientists directly toward the invisible culprit that had smothered both the flames and the villages alike.
So, scientists finally put a name to this: a limnic eruption. It is an incredibly rare natural phenomenon that is completely devoid of flames, lava, or, bomb-like explosions. Basically, a limnic eruption happens when a massive amount of dissolved carbon dioxide is suddenly released from the deep waters of a volcanic lake. To give you some perspective on just how rare this is, in all of recorded human history, this specific type of disaster has only been definitively observed twice. Both times in the 1980s, and wild enough, both times in Cameroon. It requires a very specific and highly dangerous combination of geology and deep, undisturbed water for this to even be possible.
The easiest way to think about it is like a giant, shaken bottle of soda. Because Lake Nyos sits directly above a dormant volcanic zone, millions of tons of carbon dioxide have been slowly leaking upward through the Earth's crust and into the very bottom of the lake for decades. Now, because that deepest water is hundreds of meters down, the extreme weight and pressure of the water above actually keep the gas completely dissolved in the liquid. It's exactly like the carbonation trapped inside a sealed, unopened soda bottle. But then, a trigger happens. It might have been a rock slide, maybe a small earthquake, or even just unusually cold rain, but something disturbed that deep water layer. The immense pressure was suddenly released and boom, just like ripping the cap off that shaken soda, over 1 billion cubic yards of trapped gas burst out of the water almost instantly.
Now, the truly frightening part of this whole story is that Lake Nyos isn't entirely unique. So you're probably wondering, could this happen again? And unfortunately, yes, it could. There are other deep volcanic lakes in the world that can accumulate this deadly carbon dioxide, just sitting there, waiting for a trigger. The most concerning example today is Lake Kivu, which sits right on the border between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And here's the scary part. Unlike Lake Nyos, which just had small farming villages nearby, Lake Kivu is surrounded by literally millions of people. Oh, and it holds vastly more trapped gas than Nyos ever did, making it a literal ticking time bomb that scientists are monitoring with absolute extreme caution right now.
But hey, there is some good news here. Human ingenuity actually stepped in to disarm this natural time bomb at Lake Nyos. Following the disaster, a team of international scientists came up with this brilliantly effective engineering solution. They went in and installed giant degassing pipes directly into the deepest parts of the lake. These pipes safely and continuously siphon that gas-rich water straight up to the surface. And what's absolutely amazing is that the whole system is completely self-sustaining. The expanding pressure of the rising gas actually powers a massive fountain-like release at the surface, shooting water and carbon dioxide completely harmlessly into the air. This slowly releases the gas over time, which permanently prevents that dangerous pressure from ever building up again. Talk about a real game changer.
Today, thanks to those ingenious degassing pipes, the community surrounding Lake Nyos can finally sleep safely, and the lake appears peaceful once again. But this entire event serves as a pretty stark reminder that nature doesn't always roar when it strikes. Sometimes, the deadliest disasters are completely silent. No flames, no explosions, no warning whatsoever. Just one invisible cloud changing thousands of lives literally overnight. It really goes to show that the strangest stories in human history aren't just legends. They are terrifyingly real. Which kind of leaves us to ponder, what other invisible forces are quietly gathering pressure beneath our feet, just waiting for a trigger?